Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, Assalamu alaikum, and welcome to the Harborne Islamic Study Circle HISC Seerah session 194, which is the fifth session of the Ghazwa Tabuk, the Battle of Tabuk, where there wasn't actually a battle or fighting. It's also known as the Army of Great Difficulty, Jaysh al-Usrah. And so, just briefly, last week we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ marched towards Tabuk. The army faced lots of difficulties, shortage of supplies, food, water. There was an incident where there was some strong winds and somebody got swept away. There's heat, there's exhaustion. And on one occasion, the Prophet ﷺ prays for rain because they've run out of water, and then the clouds come and it rains. They pass the land of Thamud, where the Prophet Saleh was preaching to the people, and all the caves and houses were empty inside, and some of the people, they ran into there like tourists, and they started using some of the water, and the Prophet ﷺ forbade them from eating or drinking or using that water, and the bread that they'd made, they would give it to their camels and not to eat of themselves. And they said, look, basically, don't go visiting these places as tourists, essentially, where Allah's anger is upon. So the people of Thamud, because they hamstrung the camel of Saleh, Allah was obviously angry with them, so we shouldn't look up to these people. And so he quickly passed through the valley of the people of Thamud. And then we talked about a couple of hadith about with Mu'adh ibn Jabal, and he managed to get some quality one-on-one time with the Prophet ﷺ, and they're having this sort of a conversation, and Mu'adh said, look, there's something that's been stressing me out. How do I get to Jannah? And the Prophet ﷺ, talks about the things that he should do, and then the very famous hadith of Mu'adh, where the Prophet ﷺ said, look, shall I tell you what is the head of the matter, the backbone of the matter, and the crown, the pinnacle of the matter? And Mu'adh says, what is it? And the Prophet ﷺ said, well, the head of everything is the shahada. The backbone or the spine is establishing salah and giving zakah, and the pinnacle of this matter is jihad fi sabilillah. And then he goes on to say, and I've been commanded to do qital, fighting and killing of the people, until they establish salah, give zakah, and testify their shahada. And in any deed that will raise them higher in Jannah after the fard salah, there's no deed that will raise people higher in Jannah than fard salah, other than jihad in the way of Allah. And then the Prophet ﷺ also mentions to Mu'adh that tomorrow we're going to arrive at Tabuk, and then, despite it being a desert with just a little well, he says, soon there'll come a time when this will be lush green. And the Prophet ﷺ is prophesying how Tabuk will thrive in later generations. Some of the other stories, because as we said, there's not any battlefield fighting between the army and the Romans or the Byzantines and the Christian Ghassani tribes. There's lots of little things, little stories. And one of the benefits of people accompanying the Prophet ﷺ on battles is they spend time with him. They see him day and evening and nighttime, and they get to know the character of the Prophet ﷺ, and they get to learn so much about Islam from him, from watching him, and there's so much fiqh that comes in the battles. And that, and one of the definitions of being a Sahabi is not somebody who has seen the Prophet ﷺ, it's somebody who spends a year or two with the Prophet ﷺ, and or goes on a battle or two with the Prophet ﷺ. So you're in that sort of elite company. And here we've got 20 to 30,000 people going with the Prophet ﷺ and learning from him. One of the other famous stories in the Battle of Tabuk is the fact that the Prophet ﷺ was led in prayer by another Sahabi, and this is the only time that we know of where the Prophet ﷺ followed somebody else in prayer. So the story goes, and this is narrated by Ibn Mughira, al-Mughira ibn Shuba, and it said that the Prophet ﷺ woke him up to go and use the facilities before Fajr. So he needed to go to the bathroom. So obviously the army is camped, and the Prophet ﷺ needs to go away from the army somewhere private and secluded in order to answer the call of nature. And al-Mughira took some water along with him. And so the Prophet ﷺ he had a spear and put his cloak on it to provide a screen. And then when the Prophet ﷺ came back, al-Mughira was pouring the water out for him to do his wudu. Al-Mughira says that, and he narrates this, that I was pouring the water out, and then he washed his face and his hands, and then and then he tried to wash his elbows, but the sleeves were too long; they were hanging down over his hands. So what the Prophet ﷺ, so it was a big sort of shirt or jubba that he's wearing. So what the Prophet ﷺ had to do is had to lift up the sleeves, wrap them up towards his sort of biceps or shoulder, and then wash his hands, wash up to the elbows, and so Mughira he says this again. So again, the lesson for us is that we shouldn't take the shortcuts. We have to do wudu properly up until the elbows, expose it and clean it. And then he says that the Prophet ﷺ then put his fingers inside his turban. So he's not wearing a topi, he's wearing a proper turban. So he says he wrapped his fingers inside the turban, and then he did massa or tayammum over the turban. Okay, so he wiped the top of the turban. So he didn't have to take the turban completely off and then wipe his head and then refashion the turban. He was just able to wipe inside the border of the turban and then over the turban. And again, it's these little tidbits that people pick up when they spend time with the Prophet ﷺ. And again, the fuqaha say again, it's similar for a woman who's wearing a hijab. She can pass her fingers over her scarf, do mas over the scarf. So that's again some of the opinions of the scholars. And then Mughira said, then I bent down to take the Prophet's shoes off so he could wash his feet. And the Prophet says, leave them on because I put them on when I was in the state of tahara, of purity. So he's kept his shoes on when he was in a state of purity, and so he could then just wipe over the top of his shoes, do masa again, and that was sufficient. And so again, these little hadiths just around how the Prophet did these things, and again, a lot of these are as a mercy for us. And then because the Prophet had taken so much time, he'd gone away from the camp, and then had to do wudu and then walk all the way back. The people who'd got up for Fajr, they knew the Prophet wasn't there, but they knew they had to pray Fajr on time. And so they asked Abdur-Rahman ibn Auf to lead them in prayer, knowing the Prophet is gone, but they're not even waiting for the Prophet to come back and lead them in prayer, because obviously they're thinking that the time's passing on. And even though you've got Abu Bakr Siddiq there, you've got Umar ibn al-Khattab, they ask Abdur-Rahman ibn Auf, and again, he's one of the Ashra Mubashra, one of the 10 people who were promised Jannah, given the glad tidings of Jannah whilst they were alive. And again, he's one of the elite of the Sahabi, one of the early converts. And so he stands up and he leads them in prayer. As he's leading them in prayer, the Prophet ﷺ, he returns. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he joins the end of the line. And obviously there's a bit of commotion. But the Prophet ﷺ, motions that Abdur-Rahman should carry on and finish the prayer. And so Abdur-Rahman, he finishes the prayer, and as he does the Islam, the Prophet ﷺ and Mughira, they stood up and finished the missed rak'ah that they missed. And the Prophet ﷺ then, when he'd finished, says, to Abdur-Rahman, you have done well, for verily a prophet doesn't die until he's been led in prayer by a pious man from his people. And again, this is the only time that we know somebody led the Prophet ﷺ in prayer. Later on, there's an occasion where Abu Bakr Siddiq almost leads the Prophet ﷺ, and this is when the Prophet ﷺ was essentially in his final illness, as he's about to die. The Prophet ﷺ appoints Abu Bakr to lead all the prayers in the last week of his life when he's ill. And then on one occasion, the Prophet ﷺ, he feels well enough, and the prayer started, and he comes and joins the congregation where Abu Bakr is leading. But then Abu Bakr steps back, but the Prophet ﷺ asks him to stay and pushes him to pray. But Abu Bakr, he ignores that and steps back, and the Prophet ﷺ is forced to lead the prayer. And the Prophet ﷺ says to him, how comes you essentially why did you disobey me? I told you to continue praying. But then Abu Bakr says, look, it's not fitting for me to lead the Prophet ﷺ in prayer. Therefore, I step back. So that's again another story about Abdur-Rahman ibn Auf leading the Prophet ﷺ in prayer. And then we talked about how the Prophet ﷺ, he mentioned that when they get to Tabuk, they not to drink the water. And then when they got there, there were two people who'd already just started, fiddling with the water. But the Prophet ﷺ, he told them off, and then he made dua, and then the small water gushed into enough water for the 20 or 30,000 in the army to drink. Then there's another occasion. I mean, some say the Prophet ﷺ then, after getting there, after the Fajr, when they camped in Tabuk, he then gave a sermon or a khutbah, a bayan, which is a very famous one, and others think of it as a sort of a bit like a Sermon on the Mount type thing, where a lot of good sort of morals and directions in terms of how we should be and act are summarized in a really succinct and beautiful way. So the Prophet it said that he stood up and praised Allah, how Allah deserves to be praised. And then he said to the people, O people, let's proceed, amma ba'd. And then he started telling them. So again, it's good to make notes of these and just to reflect on what the Prophet ﷺ is saying here. So he says, the most truthful of all speech is the Book of Allah. The most truthful of all speech is the Book of Allah. And the firmest handhold is the speech of taqwa, right? God consciousness. Okay, and some say it could also mean the kalma or any righteous word. The firmest handhold is the speech of taqwa. The best of all paths is the path of Ibrahim alayhi salam. And again, Allah refers to that in the Qur'an. That's the best path. The best sunnah is the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, the sunnah of Prophet Muhammad. That's the best way to live our life. The best hadith, the best saying, is the dhikr of Allah. So the best hadith is the dhikr of Allah. The best of all stories are those in the Qur'an. And again, Allah refers to that in the Qur'an. So the best of all stories are those in the Qur'an. The best of all deeds are those that are done with sincerity and dedication. The worst of all deeds are innovations, bid'ah. The best guidance is the guidance of the prophets. The best death is the death of a martyr, a shaheed. The most blind of blindnesses is to be misguided after Allah has guided you. The best of deeds is that which benefits you in this world and the next. The best knowledge is that which is followed. Not knowledge for the sake of it, knowledge that you act upon. Best knowledge is that which is followed. And the worst blindness is the blindness of the heart. Right? So before, the most blind of the blindnesses is to be misguided after Allah has guided you. And the worst blindness is the blindness of the heart. The higher hand is better than the lower hand, basically meaning that, having wealth is better than being poor, right? And that which is little but satisfies you, is better than that which is a lot but distracts you. The worst excuse is the excuse you give at the time of death. And the most evil of regrets is the regret on the day of judgment. And again, Allah says that in the Qur'an. People, where they have this, impending sense of regret on the day of judgment when it's just too late, And then there are those people who don't come to Jum'ah except on rare occasions. And there are those who don't do dhikr except very rarely. The worst of all sins is the lying tongue. The best richness is the richness of the heart. The best of all baggage that you carry is taqwa. The pinnacle of wisdom is to fear Allah. And the best thing which settles in the heart is yaqeen, firm conviction. Alcohol is the mother of all evils, and women are the forebringers of shaitan for men. The worst of all income is the income of interest or riba. The worst thing to eat is the property of an orphan, and the fortunate person is that one who learns from the mistakes of others. To curse a believer is a sin, and to fight him is kufr, and to eat his flesh is backbiting. And the sanctity of another Muslim, the sanctity of his money is like the sanctity of his blood. And whoever asks for forgiveness, Allah will forgive. Whoever controls his anger, Allah will reward them. Whoever is patient at a calamity, Allah will give him better than that which was taken away. And whoever wants to show off, Allah will show punishment through him. And whoever is patient, Allah will give him more. And the Prophet then concluded this beautiful speech by saying, "O Allah, forgive me and my ummah. O Allah, forgive me and my ummah. O Allah, forgive me and my ummah." Very simple to the point, but there's just so much depth in that khutbah, which I'll just quickly go over again because there's a lot to take in. Most truthful of speech is the Book of Allah, the firmest handhold speech of taqwa, the best of all paths, the path of Ibrahim alayhi salam. The best sunnah is the sunnah of the Prophet sallam. Best hadith is the dhikr of Allah. The best of all stories is those in the Qur'an. The best of all deeds are those which are done with sincerity and dedication. The worst of deeds are innovations. The best guidance is the guidance of the prophets. The best death is that of a martyr. The most blind of blindnesses is to be misguided after Allah has guided you. The best of all deeds is that which benefits you in this world and in the next. Best knowledge is that which is followed. The worst blindness is that of the heart, blindness of the heart. The higher hand is better than the lower hand. And that which is little and satisfies you is better than a lot which distracts you. The worst excuse is that which you give at the time of death. And the most evil of regrets is that on the day of judgment. There are those people who don't come to Jummah except on rare occasions. And there are those who don't do dhikr except rarely. The worst of all sins is the lying tongue. The best of richness is the richness of the heart. The best of all baggage is taqwa. The pinnacle of wisdom is fearing Allah. The best thing that settles in the heart is yaqeen. Alcohol is the mother of all evils. Women are forebringers of shaitan for men. And the worst of all income is riba, interest. The worst thing to eat is the property of an orphan, and the fortunate person is he who learns from the mistakes of others. To curse a believer is a sin, and to fight him is kufr, and to eat his flesh is backbiting, and the sanctity of his money is like the sanctity of his blood. If you ask Allah for forgiveness, He will forgive. If you control your anger, Allah will reward you. If you're patient in a calamity, Allah will give you better than what He has taken away. And whoever wants to show off, Allah will show punishment through him. And whoever is patient, Allah will give him more. Oh Allah, forgive me in my ummah. Allah, forgive me in my oh Allah, forgive me in my ummah. So after he sort of concluded this beautiful sermon, the Prophet ﷺ stood up and says, Allah has today given me 5 things that He hasn't given to anyone before me. Right? And again, it's a very famous hadith. Today Allah has given me 5 things that He hasn't given to anyone before me. And that's all the other prophets, no one else. And so he goes, I have been sent to all of mankind, whereas those before me were only sent to their people. And it's like sort of, some talk about Nuh alayhi salam. He was sent to his people, but by virtue of Allah destroying all the non-believers, all he had with him on the boat were believers. So you could argue that, again, he was sent to all people because those that survived were with him. But the Prophet, again, some argue that technicality, although Nuh was sent to all to his people. And then he made a dua to wipe off the face of the earth all the disbelievers. So the Prophet says, I've been given 5 things. I've been sent to all of mankind, whereas those before me were sent only to their people. I have been given help by Allah to the distance of a month's journey, so much so that the enemy will be frightened of me. And again, the fact that they're in Tabuk, waiting for the Byzantium army, the Ghassanids, everyone else who didn't turn up. Allah strikes fear in the enemies of the Prophet ﷺ. But here he's saying that fear is a month's journey away. So people who would ordinarily travel a month to meet the Prophet ﷺ, Allah helps him by putting fear in their hearts. But third thing he said is that the spoils of war, ghanima, is halal for me. Right? But not for those before me. So the previous prophets, whenever they would go to war, jihad fi sabilillah, they would collect up all the booty and they would pile it in the middle, And again, this is in the Old Testament. And then Allah would, strike it with a thunderbolt or swallow it up in the earth, or some way that all that war booty would be obliterated. And that is a sign that that was a just war and that Allah has accepted their sacrifice and their fighting. So, but for the Prophet, he said that for me, the spoils are permissible. And no other prophet was allowed ghanima except me. And then the other important thing for us is that the whole earth has been made a masjid. So whatever person of my ummah happens to need to pray, he should do ablution and pray wherever he is. Whereas the previous ummah could only pray in the houses of worship, in the temples or the synagogues. That's the only place where they could pray. Whereas for our ummah, Allah has blessed us, we can pray anywhere that's clean and dry. Okay? Anywhere in the world is essentially our masjid. That is pure. And then the fifth one, Allah told me, ask whatever you want and I will give. And I decided to save my wish, my fifth wish, my fifth request, until the day of judgment. So that any of you who says La ilaha illallah will get the fifth one. And that's the special intercession that the Prophet ﷺ will ask from Allah for his ummah. So that everyone who is a Muslim, believes in Allah and the Prophet ﷺ, will eventually enter into Jannah. They may have to do a few billion years in hellfire if they've been particularly bad, but eventually they will enter Jannah. And we talked about the story of the last person to leave Jannah and enter paradise, where he walks and he sits on the tree and he gets closer and closer and closer to the gates of Jannah. So these are 5 things that the Prophet was given that were not given to the other people. And then he finished off again in the context of the battle. They're waiting, they're anticipating the mighty Romans to come and fight. And the Christian tribes of northern Arabia and Syria, they're waiting for them. So the Prophet ﷺ, he gives some predictions as a way of boosting the morale of the people. And he turns to them and says that Allah has promised me the treasures of Rome and of Persia. And again, you've got to think these are all the 2 big superpowers. In equivalent terms, it's stronger than sort of the current US empire and the Chinese and Russian empire put together. The Prophet was living in a bipolar world where you had the Byzantians, the Romans, and the Persians, huge civilizations and really powerful armies, and these are a ragtag band of people, not even a formal army. But he's telling them that you desert people who not had the military training, you will be given the treasures of Rome and Persia. And again, this comes up later on. We'll probably do that next week, inshallah, when some of the munafiqeen, they would mock the Prophet ﷺ when he lost his camel, saying basically he's promising the people, he's promising them the treasures of Rome and Persia, but he can't even find his own camel. Again, inshallah, we'll probably talk about that next time. So again, this is you can see in the leadership qualities of the Prophet ﷺ, how he sets out his stall, how he gives good advice to people, how he gives them encouragement, how he talks about us Muslims in an exceptional way, so we feel good about ourselves, and then he tops and tails it by this really beautiful promise that, not just Jannah, in this life as well, we'll be given the treasures of Rome and Persia. And this is to an army that is expecting to fight one of the most powerful armies of the time. So then they camp and they just wait for the Romans and the Ghassanid, who basically don't turn up. They get scared. They have fear in their hearts. They've obviously got their own spies, and they know that the Prophet he's marching. He means business. There's 20, 30,000 of them. So they essentially forfeit. They don't turn up. So the Prophet he's camped. He's there at Tabuk. And some of the other things that happened there, that people notice how the Prophet it said that he stayed there for between sort of 13 and 20 days. And for all 20 days, he prayed qasr. So he, rather than praying the 4 rak'ah of Dhuhr, Asr and Isha, he would shorten those to 2 rak'ah. So for the fard prayers, he would shorten them to 2 rak'ah. He didn't join them. He just prayed. He shortened them. And again, the scholars have looked into this, and there are different opinions. But one of the stronger opinions is basically because they're on the battlefield, he's not joining them. He's just shortening them. And again, we've talked previously about the rules of traveling and travelers' prayers, and there are lots of different opinions about that. So the other thing the Prophet does is obviously he's not just going to stay there. He's the head of state. He's a military tactician. He's the chief of army staff. So he sends out expeditions. He's sending out envoys. He's trying to consolidate the further expanses of the Islamic State, of his territory. He's sending delegations to different people, different tribes, to try and win them over. And again, this is part of the politics of it. When people see that there's an army of 20, 30,000 who mean business, who are there to attack the Romans, a lot of these other tribes who were nominally attached to the Romans, because they were the most powerful, they switched their allegiance. So even though there's no fighting, you can see that the military and political benefits of being there is you consolidate the Muslim rule, you expand the territories. And that's essentially what happened. The Prophet he's sending out envoys, and there's a list of people who essentially agree, either they become Muslim or the majority of them they agree to pay Jizya, a tribute. So they recognize the political authority of the Prophet as the political leader of them. And by paying Jizya, they come under the protectorate of the Prophet ﷺ. They don't have to convert. They can stay non-Muslims, but they pay a tribute, a Jizya, to the Prophet ﷺ, and they implement the rules according to what the Prophet ﷺ did in terms of how they run their affairs. They have to cut off their allegiances with the Romans. And so someone, there's the head of Ayla, his name was Yahna bin Rawba. He came to Prophet ﷺ and he made peace with him, agreed to pay the Jizya, and other tribes, Jarba and Adur people, they came to pay Jizya, and the Prophet ﷺ gave them a letter of guarantee, which they could use to show that they're now under the protection of the Prophet ﷺ. And the letter essentially says, in the name of Allah, the most beneficent, the most merciful, this is a guarantee of protection from Allah and Muhammad, the Prophet, the Messenger of Allah, to Yahna bin Rawba and the people of Ayla, their ships, their caravans on the land and sea shall have the custody of Allah and the Prophet Muhammad, and he and whosoever are with him of the Asham people and those of the sea. Whoever contravenes this treaty, his wealth shall not save him, and it shall be a fair prize of him that takes it. Now it should not be lawful to hinder the men from any springs which they have been in the habit of frequenting, nor from any journeys they desire to make, whether by land or by sea. So this is a letter of guarantee. Final story or two. The Prophet ﷺ, again, in part of his consolidation, he sends out Khalid bin Walid with about 350, 450 Sahabi on one of these expeditions to Dawmat al-Jandal, and we talked about Dawmat al-Jandal in a previous war battle, Sariyah. And Khalid bin Walid, he goes to Dawmat al-Jandal, which is near Tabuk. It's a Christian Arab tribe. They've got a king called Ukaydir. And the Prophet says to Khalid, you will find Ukaydir away from his people in the midst of some oryxes or some cows, right? So he says you'll find him, and that's where you'll see him. And so the Khalid bin Walid, he goes with these sort of 450 horsemen, and they go to Dawmat al-Jandal, and they camp. As they're approaching the fortress where the king is, it's nighttime, so they camp at a distance. And then what happens is that this king, he obviously doesn't know that Khalid is there. He's really keen on hunting, and as a sport, he hunts these oryxes, these large cattle, as it were. So what happens is that evening, it's a full moon. This herd of oryxes, they come to the gates of the castle, and they're knocking their horns on the doors of the castle, and it's late at night. So Ukaydir, he looks out and he sees these, and then he starts to put his armor on, and then his wife says to him, well, where are you going? And he said, look, I can't let this opportunity go. You know, it's a full moon, there's all these oryxes here, I'm just going hunting. And so he just grabs a handful of his guards, not his proper entourage, just a handful of guards to go and hunt these oryxes. So they open the gates and they chase them and they start hunting them. Khalid sees that, and then Khalid, he swoops with his 450 horsemen, and they capture Ukaydir, because again, he's lightly guarded, just a few of his elite guard with him. And so they bring Ukaydir back to the Prophet ﷺ, and he doesn't become Muslim. He agrees to pay Jizya like the others, and then as part of the peace treaty, he gives the Prophet ﷺ 2,000 camels, because he's the king, 2,000 camels, 800 head of cattle, 400 armors, and 400 lances. Okay, so again, this is part of his sort of negotiating for his freedom and of that of his people. So the Prophet ﷺ, he accepted those gifts, and he accepted his offer of Jizya, and tasked Ukaydir, because he's the king, to collect the Jizya from some of the other tribes that we mentioned, Ayla, Taima, Tabuk, Dawmat. So he's going to be the main tax collector on behalf of the Prophet ﷺ. So again, we see that a lot of these tribes, from being pro-Byzantium, pro-Roman Christian, they now become pro-Muslim. They've got political and economic ties with the Muslims. The Muslim state has enlarged its borders. It's now touching the borders of the Byzantium Empire, so going to be the next chapter of the Muslim expanse in terms of into the Christian area up north. And then later on, Ukaydir, he sent some more gifts to the Prophet ﷺ to, whilst they're camped at Tabuk, and just to demonstrate his loyalty. And again, he's king; he can do this. And it's said that, and again, it's a really famous hadith where he sends the Prophet ﷺ a really magnificent shawl, cloth, coat. And the likes, people, the Arabs, they haven't seen anything as, lavish and luxurious as this coat. It's thick, probably velvety. It's got gold thread on it. It's a real piece of art, right? And the Prophet ﷺ, he puts this cloak on, and all the people, all the Sahabi, they're gobsmacked. Their sort of mind is blown, and they're walking around. They're looking at the shawl. They're touching it. They're being amazed at how good this shawl is. These are desert Bedouin people. They haven't come across. They've never been in the laps of luxury like this. And so the Prophet ﷺ, he sees the amazement in their eyes, the wonder in the eyes of the Sahabi, and he turns to them and says, "Look, are you impressed with this? For wallahi, by Allah, the tissues, the handkerchief that Sa'd ibn Mu'adh has in Jannah is more precious than this entire shawl that you're seeing." So he's basically saying, you're impressed with the finery of this garment, the tissues, the hankies that Sa'd ibn Mu'adh is using in Jannah is much better than this. This is nothing compared to what you're going to get in Jannah. And again, it's just a way of managing people's expectations and bring them down to earth, right? With glad tidings. And again, Sa'd ibn Mu'adh, we talked about him. After one of the battles, he became shaheed, and when he died, the throne of Allah shook, it is said. So that's the story. We'll finish there, inshallah. There's there's one final thing I'll just mention now, and again, it just demonstrates the leadership qualities of the Prophet ﷺ as a true leader, one that really has the loyalty of his troops. And Ibn Masud, he said, "Look, I woke up one night and I saw a fire in the distance. And there's a campsite, and he sees a fire in the far distance. So he goes to explore what's that about and to investigate. And then lo and behold, when he gets there, he sees the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr and Umar around the fire. And then they are themselves digging a grave, because somebody called Abdullah Dhu al-Bijadayn, he has passed away. So Dhu al-Bijadayn, he was a man who fled his people, became Muslim, fled his people, had basically nothing. His people wouldn't let him take any of his wealth with him. He comes to Medina. He embraces Islam in front of the people. But before he meets the Prophet ﷺ, he's embarrassed that he's basically just got the clothes on his back with him. So he tears his clothes in half, and just to give, and then puts one on top of the other, just to give the impression he's wearing two garments. So he therefore gets this nickname, the one with the two coarse garments. And so that nickname sticks. It's the way people recognize him, and it's like a badge of honor for him. But he passed away whilst they're camped at Tabuk, and the Prophet ﷺ, Abu Bakr and Umar, they are burying him. And then Ibn Masud says, "Look, I saw the Prophet ﷺ in the hole." And he asks the others to hand to him Abdullah. And so they hand Abdullah to the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ lays them out himself personally in the grave, and then he makes a dua, "Oh Allah, I am pleased with this servant of yours, so you too be pleased with him." And then Ibn Masud said, "How I wish I was that dead person in that grave at that point in time," because the Prophet ﷺ made the beautiful dua, "I am pleased with him, oh Allah, you be pleased with him too." And again, it's you know, and this is the middle of the night time. It's not for show. This is just the three of them burying somebody in the night time. And again, it shows again that you know you are allowed to bury people at night. And we know about the story of the lady who used to clean the Prophet's masjid, and then Prophet says he hasn't seen her, and then he finds out that she's passed away, and then they bury her at night time, and they do the janazah at night. So it is permissible to do it at night time, but again, you know, the books of fiqh say it's, you know, if you can, you know, for various reasons, it's better to do it in the daytime or before the end of the day. So here you see the Prophet ﷺ, you know, and God, these types of stories will, you know, spread throughout the camp, and people will, you know that he's not just the leader for the sake of it. You know, he's, you know, he leads from the front. That's how you know, have the loyalty of the people, inshallah. So I'll finish there, and inshallah next time we'll talk about some one of the letters that the Prophet ﷺ sent to Heraclius, or he received a messenger from Heraclius, and then we'll talk about some of the miracles that happened, and maybe we'll get on to the journey back, inshallah, next week. So Jazakallah khair, thank you for listening. Do remember the Ummah and us in your du'as. Stay safe, take care. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاك الله خير. السلام عليكم.